SciFi Gangstas.
I kind of begrudgingly respect just the dedication to not getting better at what you do for a living. Just coast through life.
It probably shouldn't even happen.
If you got it, you got to flaunt it, Acid.
You know what? I got a lot of stuff that I don't want to flaunt, so I just keep it to myself.
Jeremy is really big into the used mattresses. That's an excellent deal.
He has a used mattress store on the side. And we found out that Anthony's friends are all 13-year-old boys. Nice.
Whoever wins gets Acid's ball soap. Clay, how you doing?
Doing a little more poorly after that terrible introduction. I was just fine, to be honest with you.
Hello, Sci-Fi Gangsters. This is the show where we talk about science fiction, video games, and comic books. But really, it's just an excuse for me to catch up with my friends and to meet interesting people. I'm Anthony Dennar, media scholar and person who just believes in journalism, just believes in the power of journalism. I say that kind of mockingly because the character in the comic that we're talking about really believes in the power of journalism, or perhaps the writer of the comic series believes in the power of journalism. But we'll talk about that today. This is our first ever comic book club discussion where let's look, this is Jeremy's idea, so let's give him full credit for this, right? Jeremy's idea where we pick a comic book, we read as much as we can with our very busy schedules, and then we discuss it, right? So usually, so for us, Jeremy, this is your decision. Transmetropolitan is the name of the comic, and me and Jeremy, I haven't read it before. Christy, I believe you have read it before, so obviously we're kind of new to this. We're coming to this, and so we're going to be discussing the things that we liked, things that we maybe didn't like, or things that kind of were like, maybe we're a little bit on the fence about. But that is the topic for today, our first ever comic book club. But first, let's go ahead and get to our panelists here, our guests, starting off with Dr. Christina Knopf. I'm sorry, I forgot how you pronounce that again. I apologize.
No problem. It's Nope, like Leslie Nope on Parks and Rec.
I'm so sorry, Christina Nope. Fantastic. Associate Professor in Communication and Media Studies at SUNY Cortland. Christy, how you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for having me here. I'm looking forward to this.
Now, last time we had you on, we talked about the Joker, right? We had a whole episode on the Joker, and now we're talking about Transmetropolitan. I reached out to you because I was like, you know what? I kind of want to get somebody else on the show, maybe a guest to talk about. And apparently you have read the comic before, or?
I have, yes.
All right, well, fantastic. We'll be discussing the comic, things you like, things you perhaps didn't like, but yeah. All right, let's go ahead and get to my co-host, and that's Jeremy. Jeremy, your facial expressions always confuse me. I can't tell if you're scared, confused, shocked by things that I said.
Your audio went a little crazy there on my end for a second. So
yes, it did.
Did it really? Oh, well, I don't know what's going on with that. Interesting. Well, very good. Keeping everybody on their toes. On my end, I sound fine. But Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I got a decision to make tomorrow, but I guess we'll probably hit that on the catch up bit.
All right. Well, fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. Suspense. A lot of suspense there. Now, Jeremy, we didn't have a show last week, but I've been texting you frequently about the various shows that I've been watching. We'll kind of catch up on that here in a second. Well, let's go ahead and get to the producer of the show. Couldn't do the show without him. Acidtrain, how you doing?
I am very well. Thank you for asking. A little tired. The new job's been demanding, but I am enjoying it and doing pretty good.
Well, fantastic. Hopefully we'll get to hear all about that during our catch-up segment. So let's go ahead and begin. I'll go ahead and start off. There's so many things that I want to discuss here today because we haven't seen each other in a couple of weeks. Obviously, I've been watching a lot of shows. I've been sort of kind of diving into various shows at night. So I don't want to talk about Picard because I feel like I need to save this for another episode. But quick review of Picard so far. I don't understand the showrunners' need to make a Star Trek show that is not a Star Trek show. It is frustrating to me.
That's literally every Star Trek show that's on right now, though.
Well, okay, so we've already gone over this hundreds of times. By the way, the last episode of Star Trek Discovery, phenomenal. just phenomenal. All right, so okay, so anyways, so moving on. So I'm caught up on Star Trek Discovery. I enjoyed I've enjoyed the last season with all its failings, right? I started watching Picard, and Jeremy, as you know, Jean-Luc Picard, Captain Jean-Luc Picard is my favorite fictional character of all time. In fact, when I was growing up, he was what I idolized as an adult. Like, this is who I need to be as an adult. So I love this character. And I will say this about season 2. Season 1 was atrocious, but season 2 of Picard started off giving me hope, and it was almost immediately taken away. just immediately taken away. But I want to talk about Star Trek Picard. I want to talk about Peacemaker, because Peacemaker is Christy, have you seen Peacemaker yet? Have you seen the show?
I haven't yet. No, I'm falling behind on TV lately.
Yeah, I'm very behind as well. But I will say this about Peacemaker: it is a bit much, especially the first episode. So obviously, a lot of violence. It's directed and written by James Gunn. A lot of violence. Obviously inspired by the Suicide Squad, right? A lot of like nudity and like lewd humor. And in fact, the first episode is a lot. Like, and in fact, it was so much, I was like, I don't know if I want to watch this anymore. And then I started watching more and more episodes, and the show has a lot of heart, like a lot of heart. And it has, and I texted you, Jeremy, this the other day, it gives you the feels way more than it should. Like the season, there's a lot of emotional moments that you don't expect coming, particularly when it comes to John Cena's character. Like, just like obviously this whole season is supposed to be a redemptive story, because at the end of Suicide Squad, obviously he's sort of like, he's painted as a villain. Spoiler alert, Christy, I don't know if you've seen Suicide Squad. Have you seen Suicide Squad? Okay, good, very good. Right, so obviously he's painted as the villain, but this whole series is designed to redeem him, and to the extent where they really go out of their way to explain that he is a victim of his upbringing. Like, his father is the primary villain, and when you get to know the character and you get to understand his motivations, like, he's just a bro that wants to rock out and date women. That's all he wants. Like, that's his thing, right? But his father turned him into something else. And there are things that happen in the episode, in the series, that just makes you love the character. And so particularly when it comes to him and his pet eagle. The pet eagle is fantastic. Anyways, and of course, I don't know if you've heard anything about Peacemaker. There's a lot of buzz on Twitter and social media about the intro sequence. And yes, I have to watch the intro sequence every time. I don't skip it ever, because it is amazing. Like, it's amazing. And I highly recommend that you check out Peacemaker, kind of get past the like, oh man, this is just a lot of violence, a lot of like lewd, a lot of like nudity, like just, but once you kind of get into it, and obviously there's humor. Jeremy, I text you one of my favorite lines in the show is he goes, what does he say again? He says, "Eat peace, motherfucker." It's just like, eat peace. What does that even mean? No, it's just so stupid. So when he kills people, he says, "Eat peace." Anyways, he also says another line which makes me laugh every time I think of it. He's talking with his father, and obviously his father thinks he's a big disappointment and everything. And he tells his father, he's like, "Dad, maybe I'm just a grower, not a shower," or whatever. It's just, what? No, he's like, I know what I mean is, like, you have to. I grow on people, but it's just, man, it's such a stupid show that has some surprising, like, emotional moments that really make you enjoy the characters. And it's not just John Cena's that you like; it's everybody on the show. So yeah, that's what I have to say about Peacemaker. So there you go.
Is it based before or after Suicide Squad?
Oh, it's definitely after. Okay. It's definitely after, because his killing of Rick Flag is like weighs hard on him. Like, and so, which is great because it should. And he kind of, and there's other emotional things that happen in his childhood that explain why he is what he is. So there's a lot of great moments, and I don't want to spoil anything, but I love every one of the characters. They're a whole lot of fun. But Vigilante is a fun character as well. But yeah, there you go. There's my review of Peacemaker. I'm not done with the series yet. Obviously, I know the big spoiler that happens at the end, because that was spoiled for me on social media. I know what happens. I know who shows up at the end. So that kind of ruins that surprise for me. But everything else has been pretty great. Well, there you go. I said everything I need to say. I dominated this conversation. I apologize for that. But we'll go ahead and move on to Christy. Christy, what's new?
It's the end of the semester for me. So craziness, chaos. Let's make a deal time with the students.
Do you feel like you get a lot of students emailing you asking for help and with stuff? Like, can you give me a little extra points here?
So it's not so much help. It's I know I haven't been to class in 3 months. What can I do this week? So
yeah, I get that a lot as well. I always get I know I haven't turned I know the paper was due 2 months ago, but is there any way I can turn it in now? No. Nope, because I'm not grading that now.
Yeah. There was been trying to I've fallen behind, but I've been watching Marvel's Moon Knight, of course, on Disney Plus. It's been pretty good, but not one of my favorites for the Marvel series. It does not leave me anxiously awaiting each new installment the way Hawkeye did. So,
oh, interesting. Hawkeye is at the top for you.
It is, yeah.
So where does it go? Where's your ranking so far? So you have Hawkeye at the top?
I think in terms of keeping me interested from one episode to the next, yes, Hawkeye is at the top. Then I think pretty much everything else lumps in at second, and Moon Knight is coming in at a third for me, partly because that's just not one of the comics that I ever got into, I think. So it's not as intriguing to me in some ways. It's very good. The plot is excellent. The acting is superb. It could just be that I am too distracted right now with too many other things to really be able to focus on it.
I've also been in that sort of like weird situation where as big of a Marvel fan boy I am, like even like the whole, there's so many shows to watch right now. And obviously we're at a very busy part of the semester as well. But yeah, I haven't really been compelled. My son wants to watch it. So that's the real reason why I've been watching Moon Knight, because he loves it. Just like he loved Loki. He loved Loki. But I'll go WandaVision, Loki at the top, and then everything else from me.
I think probably Wanda and Loki are my closest to coming in behind Hawkeye.
Yeah, well, fantastic.
Did you watch all of What If?
I did watch all of the What If, yes.
And it looks like we're going to get all of the What If again in Doctor Strange. Literally.
Yeah. So I did not watch What If. I'm curious if I should before I go see it.
So obviously the reason why I watched it, because Victor wanted to watch it and he was really into it. Not all of them are great. Some of them are pretty fun. And I think the last big episode is pretty good. But other than that, it's fun.
Yeah. That was my take as well. I enjoyed some of them more than others, to be sure.
Well, I'll throw another one on your list. Peacemaker. I really wasn't expecting to be good, honestly. Even after the first episode, I was like, I probably won't come back to this. Ended up going back to it and definitely really enjoyed it. And Jeremy, I'm sorry to tell you, John Cena can act. I was not expecting that. He can act. Or at least he can do the things that he needs to do for the series.
He can say the words and move around.
He does more than that. Also, let me just say, he does more than that. All right, well, fantastic, Christy. So catching up on Moon Knight. All right, so we'll go ahead and get to Jeremy. What's new?
Not really a whole lot. So I've been in and out of town, busy with work. I don't think I've turned my TV on since the last time we talked, so I haven't watched anything. But my big debate with myself is if I'm going to go see Doctor Strange tomorrow or if I'm going to hold off. So I don't know. I've become increasingly, Anthony's very aware, I've become increasingly annoyed by the types of fans who've been flocking to Marvel movies, and so I haven't had the best experiences on premieres the last couple of times. But
that was just the one time, though, right? Have you had another?
No,
bad
like
experience?
it's been like continually moving that way.
What kind of things are you seeing?
I mean, so all right, so this is my big rant about the popularization of nerd culture. That
Oh, here we go.
It used to be like there was a cost to it, right? So it was like a kind of a protected space. Like you knew what kind of people the other people involved were, and everyone was kind of the same kind of person. And as it become more popular, you get a broader chunk of the population who are not necessarily as conscientious as others.
So to hold on. So, well, let me say this one thing. The people you're referring to. So me and Jeremy went to go see Spider-Man, right? And the people that you were referring to, I think, like, I wouldn't challenge their authenticity. I would challenge their like rudeness. Like they were just rude.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying they're not fans. I'm just saying as people, like, I mean, you know, like in high school, everyone who read X-Men, like I'd hang out with you, right? Like now, everyone who goes to see it, I don't want to be around some of these people.
So they were just very talkative throughout the whole film, almost to the point where they thought they were watching the film at their house. And they were responding to everything. They had a comment for everything, and it was getting bad to the point where even I wanted to say something. I wanted to, but it was very obnoxious. Jeremy, I agree with 100%. It's still not the stupidest thing I've heard in a movie theater. The stupid thing, you were there with me, Jeremy, because I remember we looked at each other when it happened. We were watching Infinity War, and obviously, you know, it's Ronin, so Hawkeye is Ronin, right? And he's about to reveal himself, like he's killing people. He's about to reveal himself, and the guy next to me goes, oh, Deadpool. Like, Deadpool. Like, he knows comic book movies enough to know who Deadpool is, but he doesn't know it enough to know that Deadpool is not part of this thing. Anyways, moving on. So there you go. Deadpool. All right, very good. All right, so Acid, what's new with you?
Oh, there's a lot new with me. I have a new job. Hooray. So, as most of everyone here on the panel knows, I was a bus driver for about 3 years, and a position came available for supervisor. So I went and applied for it, had an interview, did all the stuff, and ended up not getting it. Somebody else ended up getting it. So the guy comes in and, well, long story short, he works for about 3 days, maybe 5, and he just stopped showing up for whatever reason. And then they called me. And I've been in the position now for, 3 weeks now. It's been 3 weeks. I really have no idea why this guy just stopped showing up. This job is not that difficult. It's just, I don't think he liked the hours. Cause I mean, obviously I've been working about 10 hours a day. It's 10 to 12 hours a day so far. Just gearing down for the end of the school year. Cause I mean, we've got, I think 16 days left or something like that. So we've been, going through state inspections with all the buses and all that stuff. So it's just been one thing after another. And then now, instead of being one of them, I'm now their superior, so to speak. So, which I don't really consider myself that. I don't like that role at all. Like, I don't like I'm not going to be like their buddy or anything anymore, but I mean, cause I gotta have that, I've got to have some kind of space in case
You feel like they're talking behind your back, aren't they? This is what you're trying to say. They're talking behind your back.
I don't think so. I mean, if they are, I don't know about it. And it's not obvious. More people have come to me because there's me and then there's my counterpart that has the exact same job as me. The reason they opened this position was because of all the new schools that are open, and the new high school is going to be opening within a few years. There's a new elementary school coming. I mean, so the area is getting bigger and bigger. and they needed another supervisor just to take on, some more of the stuff. So now there's 2 of us. While I was a driver, no one went to this guy. No, he always stickler. Nobody. I can't. I'm not going to get too specific in case this goes viral. But
Right.
because with Anthony, you never know, it could go viral. But I feel like they can relate to me more because I've been in the field, right? I've been in the field. They've seen me in the field, and I still drive. I still empty the trash. I still mop the floors. I still do all the stuff that I did before. Nothing's changed. I just have more responsibilities. And there were 2 lost kids today. Got two phone calls. My kid didn't get off the bus. And then lo and behold, 30 seconds later, oh, never mind. He's coming through the door. It's that kind of stuff. Like parents are crazy. But they're just not patient at all. And then of course it's all our fault. So, but it's just that kind of stuff. It's not huge. It could be huge, but I think I'm preparing myself for the day, which I, hope it doesn't become huge, but I think I'll be able to take care of it. But I've been enjoying it, and I got through, about half of our little comic here because of all the time I've been putting in. But yeah, I'm glad I made the jump to this position.
Did the day you started, did you wake up and feel different? Like you're all of a sudden anti-union and stuff?
I woke up about an hour later. That was nice.
Oh, okay.
Because the other guy is coming in at like 5:30 in the morning, and he'll leave like 2 or 3 or something like that. And I'm coming in. I leave the house about 7:30 now, which is awesome because I get to see the kids off to school and all that stuff. I can drink my coffee and take my time, and I'll stay till about 5:30, something like that. And I still get all the vacations. I still get spring break. I still get like 2 weeks at Christmas. I still get all this stuff. The only thing that I gave up was summertime, which kind of sucks. But at the same time, I got something to do in the summer now, and my paycheck just got really, really fat. So I'm not going to complain. I'm not doing this for the money, just because honestly, I did this for something to do. If I'm being honest, I just wanted, because I would drive in the morning, and then if I wasn't working at the university, which that kind of was laxing later, I'd just come home in the middle of the day and sit here and play Halo or something, and then go drive in the afternoon. Like, it was just boring. So now I'm working 12 hours a day. Yay, me.
Well, fantastic, Acid. I'm glad to hear that everything's working out for you, and enjoying your new position of being the best boss ever in the history of the bus driving profession.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Sure.
well, fantastic. Excellent. All right, so let's go ahead and get to our topic for today. And today is our first ever comic book club where we discuss Transmetropolitan. This was Jeremy's suggestion on what to do, and obviously, I've read 3 volumes of the series. I feel like that's adequate to discuss the series, the things I liked, things I did not like. That's what we'll talk about today. We'll go ahead and start off with, we'll talk about the overall, the plot, the storyline. We'll focus on that. We'll kind of go around the horn here and talk. But first, let's go ahead and get to Jeremy. I want to get a synopsis from you as someone who has read the series before. Tell us about Transmetropolitan.
So this is one of the series that I read periodically to kind of like check in and see how I feel about it. My opinion on this one really hadn't changed every time I've read it. So it's by Warren Ellis. The premise is essentially, if you take Hunter S. Thompson and you toss him in a futuristic transhuman world, how does he behave and interact with it? And it's we only read 12 issues, so we really just start into it just sets the stage for the actual storyline to come. We see him come back into the city because he has a book deal. He's got to write 2 books, He gets a job with his previous editor, like a weekly column. We see sort of his initial kickoff that brings him back into fame. And then it's like the first part is just familiarizing the reader with the world, essentially. I mean, it's tossing you from reality into something quite different than a reality any of us would recognize.
Yeah, very good. You say you still have a favorable opinion about this series?
I do. So, like, there's a handful. So, like, Watchmen, Transmetropolitan, Preacher, and Why the Last Man, I kind of read every 10 years or so. And most of them, there was a stark difference from me reading it at 20 versus 30 and now approaching 40. But Transmetropolitan's kind of always held true. And part of it's probably because I am a fan of Hunter S. Thompson and his writings, both journalistically and drug-addled, I guess is probably the best word to describe some of it. But yeah, it's kind of held constant for me.
All right, well, very good. We'll kind of move on. I'll kind of save what I wanted to say about the plot, the storyline. We'll kind of move on to Christy. Christy, anything you want to talk about?
For me, the political commentary in this is sort of what has always interested me the most. And I think one of the things that works so well with this being a series that you can reread every 10 years or so is that it sort of applies to the experiences we've had in different ways every 10 years. You can see the reflection of what's happening around us now in it, even though it was commenting on what was happening when it was originally written. And of course, even though it is a bizarre world in many respects, science fiction is always reflecting our current society. So it's a bizarre twist, but it's still the cities that we're living in. So yeah, for me, I think that's what works as well, is that it is a series that you can revisit and it's kind of a new story every time based on what has changed or maybe not changed in the world.
Yeah, I can definitely see this being one of those types of comics where the more you read it, the more you get out of it. Particularly because it is pretty dense in a lot of ways. There's a lot of narrations that you might skip on your first, just because there's a lot of writing in it, right? So you are enjoying the visuals, or you kind of pick and choose what you want to read, just like how you typically would read a comic, and then going back and rereading it, it might give you kind of a different perspective on that and sort of catching some of the things. Jeremy, you gave me a weird reaction when I said that. What's up?
Well, you said pick and choose what you want to read. I've never thought about reading like just parts of a comic.
Interesting. You never. So when you read a comic, you don't skip a couple lines here and there sometimes?
Oh no, it's always front to back. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when I was a kid. I always I kind of probably first focus on the visuals first, and then maybe go back and read a couple things. But that's always how I've read. And we could talk about sort of like the theories of reading a comic book and how it sort of allows for the freedom of where your eyes go and everything. But yeah, so. I can definitely see this being one of those issues where, going back and rereading it, especially when we sort of advance, and how, are we getting closer to this depiction or not? We'll go ahead. We'll get to Acid. What'd you think of the storyline?
I'm kind of like what Anthony was just saying about like where your eyes go. I don't want to say reread, but I would have to concentrate heavily on each page and trying to figure out who's speaking first, who's speaking second, what I'm looking at art visually and that kind of stuff. So it was a slower read for me, which was part of the reason I only got about halfway through it. The other reason is I was very uneasy reading this. This is not usually the type of entertainment I indulge myself in, just because it is super vulgar, and I don't enjoy that. I mean, it's just personal preference. I don't understand why entertainment like this has to use so much vulgarity. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's unnecessary. You could get your point across with about half of the lines that he's saying. I actually, when it got to his first article, when he was writing live on the rooftop, I was more impressed with the writing of that article than I had been any speaking line he had said before. And then it went back to him. He's an interesting character. I mean, if I'm pushing all that aside, he's an interesting character. I still don't know what to think about him yet. Just because things have changed from, page to page. I mean, how his interactions with people, his interactions with himself, and even the cat. I mean, it's just, he's such a random guy. I don't really know how to feel about him yet. But I don't want to say that I hate it. I mean, I don't hate the storyline. I don't hate, what's going on as far as the big picture goes. But yeah, so far, I'm gonna finish it, but it's gonna take a minute.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the heart of Spider Jerusalem is that. So partially, I think the excess of the story is intended to show the normalcy of that setting, and then also that Spider as a character is just is very prickly and unpredictable, but at his core, cares a lot about everything.
Yeah. So, Jeremy, to kind of bounce off what you were talking about. So, obviously, when I'm reading this comic, the first things that come to mind when I am looking at obviously the visuals and everything is the first thing that pops to me is sort of like the lewdness of the comic itself, right? In terms of the visuals, the shock value, right? And so the more I read it, the more I realized, yeah, I guess that's sort of the point, right? So this is the point that the author's making, is that in the future, everyone is so jaded that this is just normal life, right? That people are walking down the street naked, they're peeing on the side of the road, that's sort of like, just like this idea of there really are no boundaries anymore. So I totally get how that was designed to be, this is the point, and everything else that comes with it as well, in terms of like the hyper mediated environment where, you're almost bombarded with media, right? So like you'll say something, and then obviously the big screen will come up and sort of jar you awake, so I definitely understand where the author is saying, in the future, someone who, 200 years ago watching our cable news would probably lose their mind. And just this idea that, 200, 300 years in the future, what will news be like? And this idea that it's just going to be this intrusion into your privacy. There's the borderline between the public and the private is going to be so blurred. The boundary between what is appropriate and inappropriate behavior is going to be mixed. What's acceptable violence and what's not acceptable violence. But then obviously that sort of blurs into the idea of what it means to be a human as well, right? So obviously a part of the plot line is you have these humans that are, getting alien DNA to kind of convert to aliens, and how they're being mistreated. Obviously, we can make connections with transgender individuals. We can kind of make the analogy there, obviously, sort of kind of pointing in our particular context. Yeah, just a lot of interesting things that come to mind when I'm reading this comic. I do feel like when I first read it, at first I thought it was a little superficial on the surface. I thought it was just another comic that is designed to jar you into keep reading, right? So we're going to show nudity. We're going to use foul language. We're going to have a cat just pissing on the bed. And we're like, right. But I understand now, reading it more and more, I get that that's the point. Do I feel like it always hits? Not necessarily, but I do understand the motivation behind it. Some things that I liked. I like the idea of exploring what it means to be human and how different cultures start to develop based on that. So experimenting with not just gender, but in terms of like, and race, but like alien race, experimenting with what's the difference between being human and being a machine, right? You know, the whole foglet thing reminded me a whole lot of The Matrix. Remember the Matrix new movie? That idea where you're a machine, but you're human, but you're also a machine, which is kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, these were all these things grew out of the same initial transhumanist manifesto and movement of, you know, the philosophy that human beings should not be tied to the products of evolutionary biology, right?
Yeah, which is interesting because I've always been, my particular philosophy, if you will, is I've always believed that the mind cannot be separated from the body. That it's impossible. So the body and the mind are so without the body, you can't have the mind. Like you as a person are both your body and your mind together, and you cannot separate the two. That's always been sort of my philosophy. The more sort of I read and everything, this idea of like me as a person, I have to have the body. You can't just take who I am as my mind and put it in somewhere else because then I'm no longer me, right? But yeah. So that's a whole other.
Yeah, I mean, but it's all just data. Right. So you could have an entirely synthetic body that has the same hormonal milieu that you have as a human and not be able to tell the difference. Right. Like there is interplay, but there's no reason it has to be tied to a particular type of wetware.
Interesting. I don't know if I agree with that or not. But
I mean,
there's no way to prove
I'd be happy to have the scientific and engineering discussion.
Fantastic. So I do want to talk about a couple other things that came to my mind. And one of the things that I find very funny about this particular comic, and especially when we look at it through our political climate, when it comes to fake news and that sort of thing, is this idea that Spider, that his power, like his ability of being a good journalist, can sort of make its way through all the garbage. Like, so I'm such a good journalist and good a writer that I can sort of, when I write something, everybody notices it because I bring it back to what journalism is supposed to be, which I find kind of funny because I feel like if we actually look at our political climate nowadays, it's not that people, it's not that there's not good journalism out there anymore. It's just that people don't care. People don't want good journalism.
I don't think it's that people don't care. It's that the signal to noise ratio is skewed. So the noise is much, much higher.
Yeah, but I would argue that people want the noise. Like the people would rather have the noise.
There's a difference between wanting it and being, because everything has been tuned to play with our evolved synapses, right? To be dopaminergic. So there's a difference between wanting legitimate truth, but then seeing the shiny ball and chasing it because we're human and that's how we respond.
Okay, great. What's the difference? So it's the same outcome.
It's the same outcome, but it's different motivation. So my argument is not that people are lazy and not that people are stupid.
Oh, no, I don't.
But that manipulation is much more sophisticated.
See, I've always been hesitant as a media scholar to believe the idea that the sort of like the media is the enemy. It's the media's fault for why that we don't have good journalism anymore, or that there's the prominence of sensationalist news and that sort of thing. Obviously, we could sort of talk about economics, how that affects things, and everything. But I also feel like the audience itself often drives this, and it's a dynamic relationship. So I've always been very hesitant to say the reason why we're in our current media climate is because of the media itself. right? And there's so many other factors that contributed to this. But so let me kind of go back to what I was talking about with Spider. So what I find interesting is that obviously he believes in the power of journalism, right? That's his whole shtick, is that I'm going to tell the truth. And what I find interesting is in the comic itself, the people are responding to the truth and they're responding to good journalism, and it's changing the world. And what I'm saying is that in our real world, that's not going to happen. Like people, like it's not like all of a sudden someone's going to have journalistic integrity and actually write a compelling, nuanced story, and then the whole world's going to go, look at this. Let's make this person famous, right? So that's what I find kind of interesting about this particular comic series is this idea that in this world where there's so much noise, that when you have one particular person, he can just break through that noise. And I would say, in maybe this fictional world, perhaps, but if we took it in our current world, the reason why we have so much noise is because there's so many factors, but a lot of it has to do with the audience itself. But Jeremy, I feel like you want to say something.
No, I was going to say like the limited. I feel like your assumption about his impact is probably overstated.
Interesting. Okay, so
later in the story,
okay,
people do not listen to him, and bad things happen. So I don't think it's the fact that I don't think it's that everybody in the city is paying attention to him. It's just that he was a popular writer who is back, and some people pay attention to him.
And he earns a lot of enemies as well. So people are listening, but not necessarily in a way that's changing the world for the better. He's got death threats out on him. So, and to add into this, that I think in this world, Spider breaks through the noise simply because he sounds different from the rest of the noise, not necessarily because it's good journalism. And we can look at certain politicians in the present day who have managed to sound different and get a following simply because they didn't sound like other politicians. So if you sound different from the noise around it, it's going to get noticed. That doesn't necessarily mean people paying attention is a good thing.
Yeah, I think you guys both made excellent points. I can definitely see that being the case as well. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, just not necessarily a critique of the comic itself, just in terms of what I've noticed about our current landscape and sort of like the debate that's out there right now, where it's like, why are we in our particular political climate? Is it because the media caused this? I would say no. It's not because the media caused this. But it's far more complex than that. But yeah, because I feel like a lot of times the media, whatever you want to call the media, which is kind of a ridiculous statement. The media,
that
right?
Just even referring to the media makes me cringe.
Yeah, yes, but yeah. If we want to narrow it down to the news media, maybe that's even that gets a little more narrow. But yeah, so I often push back against sort of that idea. But yeah, I feel like you guys made interesting arguments there. So let's go ahead and we'll move on. We talked about the plot a little bit. I think I had other things I want to say about the plot that I find kind of interesting. But we'll kind of move on to the artwork. What do we think about the artwork? And Jeremy, we'll kind of get back to you. What do you think?
So artwork is one of those things I don't really look at too much. Like, to me, it's more about the detail involved. I don't necessarily care of the glossiness or the shininess or any of that. And so I do really enjoy the artwork in Transmetropolitan because mainly the attention to detail in the scene. In setting out to build this world. So yeah, I mean, it was started in 97, so it's a product of its time. Yeah, it still holds up for me.
All right, well, excellent. We'll go ahead and get to Christy. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say I agree. It's a product of its time. To me, it's sort of, it's good. It's very typical dystopian artwork in many ways. It looks like many of the other techno dystopian pieces that were of similar vein. I'm thinking American Flag, for example, is another case of the hyper mediated environment. I enjoy it reading it now in 2022 and kind of looking at the interpretation of what advanced technology was going to look like, laptops that resemble typewriters and things like that. So I kind of enjoy that. Yeah, for me, some of the artwork is what takes the excess to the excessive, the vulgarity and the grotesquerie that I think at times can detract from the plot to a certain extent, and I think in many ways detracts from Spider's positioning as, a moral commentator on the world. When you see him plunging his face into a bucket of eyeballs, it just is. Those are the moments that kind of I find distracting from the whole. But I do like all of the other touches that go into things, the advertisements that you see on the streets, the tiny little Easter egg types of things that if you slow down to look at the details. But it is a very text heavy book, so I also find it pretty easy to read through it and ignore the artwork in many cases.
I'm glad you brought that up because I've always divided comics into two categories just in my head. Is text heavy and image heavy. And I've always been more of a fan of image heavy comic books just because I read all the dang time. And when I read a comic book, I want a break. But I totally understand why this particular comic, it doesn't need to be text heavy. So something different from, what's the name of the comic where the Netflix show was based on it with the kid with the antlers? Come on, what's the name of it? Anyways, that was very visual heavy, and I've really enjoyed that particular comic. But you're right, this is text heavy, and you end up spending majority of your time reading the text and less time enjoying the images, which I find it kind of interesting. But we'll go ahead and move on to Acid. What do you think of the images, the visuals?
The artwork was very interesting, and honestly, this is probably really sad that I thought this was my first thought when I was looking at the artwork, because before I even read anything, I was more curious about how the art style was. So I was just kind of flipping through, and it reminded me of very 90s, like Ren and Stimpy type artwork. I mean, you remember Ren and Stimpy, like that cartoon. It's very gross humor, gross artwork, but I mean, vulgar images aside, the artwork's very appealing to me. And just on a side note, I was actually marked one of my more interesting artworks. I don't think I can show it on here, but it was when they went to the the religious emporium or whatever it was, and there's a side page. It's like, on one whole page, and it just shows all these different religions. I don't even want to call it that. It's like Church of Elvis, and hey, come back to Zeus, he's back, and like all of this stuff. Yes, that one right there. Yep, that's it.
There we go. That's a good one. Yeah.
Just to be able to see the author's vision of what religion is going to look like, in the future. Because, I'm a Christian, and I see it. I don't see this, but when you look at denominations, this is kind of how I look at that. There's a bajillion denominations of the same principle with minor and some major differences. But when I look at this, I'm like, yep, this is it. Because you've got some over here. It's like, oh look, be healed over here, and oh look, there's this guy drinking St. Peter's beer with holy thoughts on his chest, and it's plugged into his brain, and it's just funny. It's hilarious to look at some of this stuff. But yeah, as far as the artwork goes, I really like the artwork.
I think it's interesting you mentioned Ren and Stimpy, because I was sort of thinking about the excess and comparing it to The Simpsons Itchy and Scratchy, as far as the excessive violence and excessive blood to make a point about violence in television. So,
because I mean, there were a few like puking scenes in the here and that kind of stuff. Like that kind of reminded me of that gross humor Ren and Stimpy type. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely see what you're talking about.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, very good. So a couple of things I want to say about the artwork here. I think the art, obviously the artist's goal is to make us feel uncomfortable, almost to the point of nauseous. Like I feel like that's been sort of like the motivation of the artwork here. And I can point to several instances where, like the heavy smoking for one thing, just where everyone's smoking, but like the editor or whatever has like 5 cigarettes in his mouth and he's smoking 5 cigarettes. Like I feel like Christy, you mentioned excess. That's such a good word to mention here. But just like this idea that I'm not getting enough of this cancer-causing material, that I need to put 5 of them in my mouth.
But they don't get cancer.
Yeah,
that's the beauty of the world.
Yeah, they don't.
Right, which is interesting, right? Which is kind of interesting because they've cured cancer, but they still have decided to use this cancerous drug, right? Because of the nicotine, obviously. But it sort of kind of ties into this idea that in the future, they're smoking. But I think, obviously, once again, it kind of goes back to my idea of it makes the current reader nauseous because of everything that we know about cigarette smoking. Like it definitely made me nauseous. Jeremy, you can shake your head all you want. So then, like the cat pissing on the bed, and just like the random stuff, like the dirtiness. There's some funny lines in here as well. Like he's in the porta potty. He's like doing his work on the porta potty. Like just this idea of like kind of like a disgusting space. That's where he's doing his work because it gets his privacy. But he's in a porta potty, which is kind of gross. Yeah, just I found it interesting. One thing I do find kind of if you go to some of like the splash pages, the artwork is far more detailed and more what's the word? More artistic, right? More expressive, which I kind of enjoy. But yeah, that's kind of my take on the artwork. There's this idea of it's sort of overpolluted, dirty. They continually use language as like you can get infected. Like Spider is constantly talking about, oh no, this is a spot, or this is a person who can infect me, right? So this idea that you're just constantly in contact with germs and disease, which I kind of find interesting. Sort of kind of goes back to my theme of like this idea of I want the reader to read this while being disgusted. But yeah, well, very good. That's kind of what I want to talk about when it comes to the artwork. All right, so let's go ahead and get to our final theme of the day, and that is the characters. What do you think of the characters? Jeremy, what do you think of the characters?
Well, in the first 12 issues, you only see a very small subset of the actual characters who come along. So you really just see Spider and Shannon. But yeah, I mean, I like both the characters. I like their sort of arcs throughout the storyline. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I've always liked Hunter S. Thompson's approach to writing, and at least respected his approach to life, even if I didn't understand it at times. So yeah, I don't have anything against the characters.
All right, well, very good. Christy, what did you think of the characters?
I really like Spider's interactions with his editor. One of my sort of little side interests has always been fictional accounts of journalists. And Spider, just despite the futuristic sci-fi dystopian world he lives in, Spider is the archetype of the fictional journalist. He's not a hard drinker, but he's got every other drug under the sun at his disposal. So he still fits the sort of cinematic perspective of the drunken journalist that needs that buffer between the horrifying truths and the trying to fight the good fight that they struggle with. There are times that I want to like Spider more than I do, because he is a very complicated character in many ways. So there's moments when he kind of lets me down. I want him to be just a little bit better than he is, but that's also what makes it a more compelling read in many ways, and a little bit more real, despite the ridiculous and yet all too realistic aspects of the world that he lives in. So
yeah, it's kind of funny because obviously sort of this is supposed to be a commentary on the corruptness of the future, and like sort of like the dystopian future that we could all be, living in someday. And Spider, who is this he's just a jerk. This jerk, he's the moral compass, which I find kind of fascinating, is that this guy, who really is a jerk in every way, is the good guy of this particular world, which I kind of find interesting. But yeah. All right, Acid, what you got?
Spider, and I don't know. This is what I thought, so I'll just say it. Spider reminded me of. Did you ever see The Social Network? The movie?
I did.
You know what I'm talking about? He reminded me of going back to saying how he was a jerk, but he was really good at what he was doing. Jesse Eisenberg kind of put that character for Mark Zuckerberg in the film. I thought it was, I don't want to say exactly, but it kind of reminded me of his mannerisms and how of a jerk and D-bag he could be. But at the same time, every once in a while, you'd see a hint of niceness come out of him, and then it would immediately be taken away by something stupid, So Spider to me is kind of like that. But I am, from where I am in the book now, the relationship between him and Shannon is I'm starting to enjoy a little more, because she has been, I don't know, I feel like emotionally distraught by him and her current boyfriend right now, and I'm curious to see where that goes. But there was a glimpse, just a little glimpse of niceness come from Spider towards her, where I am right now, and trying to make her feel a little better. So I think, kind of like what you were saying, Christina, like I want him to be a little bit better than what he is at times, and then it's like he immediately lets me down, like one page later. So
I do like the politicians. I think the politicians are great because they're sort of archetypes of politicians, right? You have the smiler, right, who's just this phony guy who just smiles all the time. And then you have the sort of like the fascist guy, right, which is sort of another archetype. You won't get into politics, who that archetype is. But yeah, so kind of interesting. None of us mentioned the cop dog. No one's going to talk about the cop dog. Like just this random character that pops into the story and then just disappears. I mean, he doesn't disappear. I mean, but there's like this weird non-payoff of the cop dog. So I asked it. I think you haven't got to the part yet. Okay. But there's just this. Jeremy, maybe you can help me out with the backstory here. But there's a dog who is a cop, but he's also sentient. He has a sort of a past with Jerusalem, and he wants to finally get revenge. And he jumps to kind of get Jerusalem, like you think he's going to finally get him, and he just misses, and then that's it. That's the story of the cop dog. Jeremy, what do you have to say about that?
No, I mean, I think it's one of the little funnier side stories in the early issues. I mean, it's and ultimately it would come out to be that Spider plays a massive role in this person's life, and from Spider's perspective, he has no idea who this person is. Like, he wouldn't remember him So it shows sort of the collateral damage of personalities that are that strong. But I think it's a funny aside in that issue.
All right. Well, very good. Excellent. Yeah, there's a random cop dog. Why is there a cop dog, Jeremy?
You can just say cop. You don't have to be speciest.
Fair enough.
But yeah, he's just a cop.
Why isn't he a dog's body? Do we know?
He's a sentient dog. This is a world where brain computer interfaces are old hat. So hyper intelligent non-humans are a reality or possibility.
Well, very good. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for the explanation on the cop dog situation. Well, very good. All right. All right. Well, very good. That was our sort of review of Transmetropolitan. We enjoyed some things. We talked about the artwork. We talked about the story. We talked about the characters. Thank you, everybody, for being on the show. Once again, thank you so much for Christina Knopf for being on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. And Jeremy, always good to have you on. And then Acidtrain, always good to have you on as well. That is the show for today. Once again, don't forget to check us out at SciFiGangsters.com. We broadcast on YouTube, also wherever you get your podcasts. We'll also you can listen to us on that. That's the show for today. Goodbye, everybody.